Hey guys, welcome back to another 3D printing video, and in today's video we're going to be looking at the Alfawise U30. So this printer has been out for a while, but it's still a good overall printer and definitely has a lot of value for the price. So in this video we're going to unbox it, set it up, and do some prints. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, so the U30 comes in this box, which is not very large and not terribly heavy either. It does say on it 8.7 kilograms. So I got this one from GearBest, and I think that's where they exclusively sell them or even make them or distribute them. But in any case, it did come all the way from China. So I've already cut the tape. Let's go ahead and open it up. Alright, so we got the nice foam, and here we can see all the pieces. So we do have a quick start manual, I guess, guide. So it's kind of like a big sheet of paper. It tells us all the parts that are included, and then we have steps 1, 2, 3, 4. And as we flip it over, we'll go all the way to step 12. So there is some assembling to do, but I think most of it is somewhat pre-built, so it shouldn't be too hard to assemble. All right, so I'm just gonna pull out the parts one by one. So we got a little bit of test filament, PLA, US power cord, and it looks quite long. That's nice. Some zip ties, the touch screen with the Alfawise logo. Looks like some kind of bracket assembly, and there's a belt also. An all metal spool holder, some tools including a wrench and 6 Allen wrenches, and these are the nice ones with the ball end and they're long. So here we have a bunch of hardware and a coupler here, so quite a few parts to put together, but that's not too bad. Here we get a USB adapter to micro SD, and there is a card in there that's unmarked. A couple 2020 channels, 2 different kinds. And here we have the bed, and it is a heated bed. So we got aluminum glass and then the Build Tech layer on top. All right, so it looks like we've got through the top layer. Let's go ahead and keep going down. All right, and over here we have quite a few more parts, and there's definitely quite a few things to assemble here. There's a lot of pieces. Let's see which one, even though the base seems to be all assembled. All right, so here we have the hot end assembly, and that is tethered to the base. Okay, so I think what we need to do is pull out the whole base. But before we do, let's check a closer look at this hot end. So it's quite small, and we do have a normal kind of fan that's for cooling, but overall a pretty standard looking heat block, and it's got a small cooling fan here. So let's go ahead and try to pull this guy out. So it's definitely nestled in there quite well, but it's coming out. All right, it looks like we only have a few things left. So we have this X motor and the extruder motor here on this one assembly. Looks like our motor for the Z axis, and it already has the bracket pre-mounted. We have the lead screw and a couple 2040 channels. And that appears to be everything for the box. All right, so the first thing you want to do is you want to check, make sure that your frame, the bottom base here, is nice and flat. So if you got any kind of wobble back and forth, then you might want to loosen these bolts here and straighten that out and then tighten them up. But either way, we need to check them all and make sure they're tight, because they do go loose over time. And as you can see, they do tighten up a bit more. And so there are bolts that are even more important to check, and that's, hopefully you guys can see these in the middle here. So these are the ones that hold the Y-axis rail here. And the only mounting point they have is 4 bolts right here. And so if these are loose, your whole rail here can move quite easy. So you definitely want to check these and tighten them up really good. All right, so once you get the frame all nice and solid, what you want to do next is you want to check your bed travel here. So make sure the belts are aligning with the pulleys, and also that the bed is tight. And mine is definitely tight, but it appears to be a little too tight, because when I move it, I can feel bumpiness. So we definitely, looks like, need to adjust the eccentric nuts on the wheels. So there's 4 wheels underneath, and 2 sides are solid, and then 2 of them have the eccentric nuts. And so what we're gonna do is gonna grab this wrench, turn the eccentric nuts a bit, and loosen the bed. So now it's loosened, it's kind of wobbling around. So we're gonna tighten them up just barely, and you want it to be barely tight on the channel where it travels, but not loose where it moves around. So that's the trick here. So I can feel that there's a quite tiny little wobble, so I'm just gonna go just a tiny bit until the wobble disappears. All right, so that feels like it's good right there. Same thing for the other wheel, very small movements, and there we go. So that should be good right there. Let me see how that feels now. Oh yeah, that's much better, and we got no wobble. All right, so this is what underneath the printer looks like. So we can see our main board right there. Then we have the power supply here, and everything is nicely crimped and insulated. So everything looks good over here. Now another important thing that we need to do under here, actually on the side here, we can see that there's a switch from 115 to 230 volts. So depending on, you know, where you live, you might want to switch this if it's not already, or at least check it. Because if you live where there's 200 volts and you leave it on 115, most likely this thing will blow. So mine's already set to 115, so I'm good to go there. All right, so that's usually what I do first before I even do anything, is check the rollers on here and check the base, make sure it's flat. So now that we know that that's good, let's go to step 1. And step 1 is installing these channels here. And we can see, if we're looking to the front of the printer, that the channel with the 2 holes here on the side goes on the left side. So here we have the 2 channels, and you can see those little holes right there. So they will go here, and the other one will go here. So there's a packet of M520 bolts, and we're gonna need 4 of them. So we're gonna grab our bolt, go through the hole, and start it to the channel. So we're gonna tighten these up, but very loosely, just so it holds it. And the reason you don't want to tighten them yet, because once we install all the pieces, these might have to fluctuate just a little bit back or forth, or, you know, to give way. So leave them loose a bit where they can move around if they have to. And then once we build everything, we're gonna tighten them up. So same thing for this side. All right, and so that's what we look like so far. All right, so our next step is step 2, and that is connecting this extruder slash X-axis assembly to the X-axis channel. Now the channel looks like this. There's a bunch of little holes here, and there's a couple of larger wallowed out holes. So the wallowed out part actually accommodates a bolt, and it's this one right here. So, and the part of the channel that you're going into is the one that has the 2 holes. The other side actually has the 3 little tiny holes. So we're just gonna connect them like this together. And then through the top over here, it's kind of hard to get to even, is you're gonna run 2 bolts through there. And they are the M416 bolts. So this part is quite tedious, but I found that if you put the wrench through the back side here, there's a hole inside, and then start the bolt and put your wrench on it like that. So we have control of the bolt now. When we go to connect, we're ready to go with the bolt and the wrench. So that works out really well. And we can kind of do the same thing for the other side. All right, so we're gonna snug these up really good. And that is step 2. All right, so for step 3, we're gonna roll the hot end assembly onto the X-axis that we just built. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna flip it around this way. So this is kind of like the back side. And then we're gonna grab the hot end assembly, and we're just gonna roll it in there like this. Just like that. And we will need to adjust this eccentric nut, but we're going to do that later when we adjust all the wheels, when we're checking everything towards the end. All right, so that was simple enough. So step 4, we need to complete the other end. So if we're looking at it, it sits just like that, backwards or towards the back. And we can see we have the Y bracket that goes right there, and then the tensioner bracket goes on the other side of that. So here's our Y bracket and our tensioner. So we're using the same M416 bolts. On the Y bracket, you can see that this bolt right here kind of protrudes, and it actually goes into this wallowed out area. Just like that. And then there's 2 bolts that go through into the channel that hold the bracket. So not too complicated. And we're gonna go ahead and tighten these up really good. All right, and so that's how that goes. So you guys can see the whole thing. So if we flip it around to the front, we can see the 3 little holes right here. And that's actually where this tensioner pulley goes. And then there's 2 slots here that we can start our bolts on. And so we use the 2 outer bolts, and the middle one we just kind of ignore. All right, so we don't really need to tighten this, so I'll just run the bolts down because we will need to adjust this pulley when we put our belt on. So this is what it looks like. So we have the pulley, the hot end here, the Y bracket, and then our assembly. All right, so for step 5, it actually wants us to put the belt on now. So I guess let's go ahead and do that. So we have a little belt in the bag, and we also will need a few zip ties. So putting the belt on is not that hard. What we're gonna do is, if you're looking at the top of it, is we're gonna take the teeth of the belt and go down into the channel, and then go underneath these rollers here. And then we're gonna go out on this end where the gear is, and we're just gonna loop around and go back underneath, just like that. And on the other side, it's quite simple. We're just gonna go around this little idler pulley here and then under. So essentially our belts are both meeting under here to the frame of the hot end assembly. So we're gonna take one of the ends, it doesn't matter which one. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna make a loop. It doesn't have to be a big loop, kind of a small loop, teeth to teeth. And then we're gonna take a zip tie and we're gonna zip tie the loop. Make sure you zip tie it really strong. And then we're gonna slide the belt over this bracket right here. So and then we're gonna take our other end, and what you wanna do is get close to where it needs to be and then pull it out, and also zip tie this side. And if you're pretty confident about the length being right, you can go ahead and cut off the access here. So then we're gonna slide the belt onto this side, and we can go ahead and cut off these little zip ties. All right, so that's how the belt goes all the way around. And the way you adjust the tension is on this side. You just kind of pry on it a little bit to stretch it. And then you tighten these 2 bolts and it will put the tension on the belt. But it's a little bit hard to do this while this is out. So I'm going to do this later when I adjust all these wheels. All right, and so the next step is 6, and that is installing this whole hot end X-axis assembly onto the 2 channel frames. All right, so that's the front of it. You want to make sure that your cables are not going to be kinked, so you might need to rotate this one way or another. So once everything looks pretty good, we're just going to go on to the top of the channels here, and we're going to roll it right on, just like that. And it's going to roll in and go all the way down. So now we go to step 7, which is the brace up here at the very top. And mine here is wrapped in this plastic. So the wall load out holes go to the top. And we're going to use the last 4 of our M520 bolts. All right, so we're going to get them closed, but not tight yet. And the reason you don't want them tight is because what you want to do first is you want to bring the whole assembly up to the top and then tighten them. Because then you're getting the correct width between the 2 rolling surfaces there. So now we're going to bring this down, and we're going to do the same thing for the bolts that hold this vertical channel underneath. If you guys remember, we never tightened those. And the reason we didn't tighten them is because we're waiting for this piece have the perfect separation between. So this way we have a really straight travel up and down. All right, so we're going to tighten these up on both sides. And actually, guys, I realized I made a mistake because I think this whole wiring needs to not be in the front of the printer, but go to the back of it, so through here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top channel back off and move that wire over, and then tighten this back up in the same way we did earlier. All right, so our pack of wires are now going through here and to the back. Now let's go to step 8, and that is the Z-axis motor with the lead screw. We're going to flip it around. And so our Z-axis motor goes right here, and there is actually 2 holes right there, and that's where the bolts will thread to. And obviously we're going to need our coupler. Let's go ahead and install the coupler onto the motor shaft. So what you're going to do is you're going to find the flat part of the shaft, and one of the set screws will go over that. And if you look at the coupler, there's a bigger hole and a smaller hole. The smaller hole will go over onto the shaft. And so what you want to do is you want to put about half of it through the shaft, and then half of it will be the lead screw. So when you get that about right, you're going to tighten the set screw, and we can go ahead and tighten the other one down here. So let's go ahead and unpack the lead screw. And it shouldn't really matter which side goes where, but what you're going to do is run it through this brass coupler here, just like that. So we're going to run it down quite a bit here. So now when we lift this, we can go ahead and put the motor under there, and that can go straight into the coupler. So we're going to grab our 2 little remaining bolts, and we're going to tighten up the Z motor to the channel. We're going to snug those bolts up real good, and that's it. It feels really solid over here. If your lead screw is going all the way down where it's supposed to be, go ahead and tighten up these set screws. So now everything is connected. So now when we spin this, you guys can see that it's all working together. All right, so the next step is step 9, and that is the spool holder. Now the spool holder is already pre-built, so all we got to do is mount it, and it goes right on the top here on the left side of the printer if you're looking at it from the front. And the holder itself will point out to the back. So here we have 2 T-nuts as close as possible to that side. So with the T-nuts, what you want to do is you want to unscrew the bolt quite a bit and then start screwing it back in. And if you're centered on the channel, the T-nut will turn inside the channel and lock itself in. So these T-nuts could be a little bit tricky if you've never used them. All right, so we're going to snug this up. So our filament will go onto here and then go down into the extruder here. All right, so our next step is step 10, and that is installing the bed. So this is the hardware that we will need and the bed itself. So let's go ahead and unwrap it. All right, so the bed comprises of the top layer, then the glass, and then the aluminum. And then underneath here we can see we have a heated surface that heats the aluminum. And here is our plug, which is soldered to the bottom here. So what we need to do is we need to remove the top layer. So we're gonna take these clips off. So once you take all the clips off, the glass and the build surface comes off. So let's grab our hardware. So the way this works is quite simple. We're just gonna grab a bolt, put it through. And usually what I like to do is I'll do one end and then I'll do the other. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys the front here. This is easier to see. And then we're gonna grab a spring and go through the bolt. And that's it. And then this bolt is gonna go through the hole of the frame. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this side. Grab a bolt, grab a spring, and then we'll go down into the frame. And then our little knob will go underneath, just like that. So now I'm gonna do the other side, the back side. All right, and obviously guys, you want the power plug port here to go to the back. So after you get them all started, the next thing you want to do is you want to pre-tension the springs about half tension. And the reason you want to do this is because you want to have a little buffer when you're leveling the bed in order to go a little bit down or a little bit up. I like to usually compress them about halfway, and that works really well. All right, so now we can put our build platform back on and go ahead and clamp it down. And that was step 10. So step 11 is installing the touchscreen. And the touchscreen goes right here on this side towards the left of the printer. So there's a white ribbon cable that's coming out of the control box there. And we're going to connect that to the back of the screen. And if you guys look carefully, you can see here there's a little black tab and it actually pulls out. So when it's pulled out, you can insert the ribbon cable and you insert it with the shiny leads down. So the blue goes up. So you need to make sure that you go in there all the way. So once you're in there all the way, we can lock it down by pushing this black little piece back down into it. And that locks it in. And that should be good right there. And the screen will connect right here to this channel. And the 2 little bolts are M5 by 6 millimeters. And they'll go just like that. All right. And believe it or not, guys, we are on the last step, which is step 12. And that is connecting all the wiring. So this part is actually not as hard as it seems. Everything is labeled and should make sense. So let's start here on the bottom by the brains where all the wires come out. So we have 2 shorter wires here. And if we look at them, they're labeled. So this one says Z. So this is a Z motor plug that'll go right here to the Z motor, just like that. Now actually looking at the wires, we did forget to do one thing, or maybe I didn't see it or miss it, is installing this Z axis switch. And that will go here on this channel somewhere, and there's a T-nut behind it. Now the way this works is that this wheel goes down and then clicks it. So this will need to be adjusted up and down. And we should probably go ahead and do that. And the way I do it is once you get your bed, relatively where you want it, this is where you have the springs compressed halfway. So now we can go ahead and lower the hot end. And so what we're doing is we're lowering the tip almost all the way down to the bed. So I need to put this out of the way, it was too high. So we're gonna go down all the way to the bed. So once it hits the bed, we're gonna back up just a little bit, and then we're gonna grab this end stop switch and we're gonna go all the way up on this wheel where it clicks. And then we're gonna tighten it right there. And that should be really close where it needs to be. So this is quite an important step, because if you don't do this step, you can potentially, your nozzle can go into the bed pretty hard. If you followed all the steps till this point, this should work out just right. And later, if your bed is not leveling like you would want it, you might need to adjust this up and down depending on, you know, the situation. Doing it like this usually works out perfect for me because the springs are compressed. We can adjust up and down a little bit, and that should be good right there where it is. So now continuing with the wiring, we're going to grab the Z-axis switch and we're going to plug it in. All right, so out of the back of the printer, we have a pretty big wire here, and this actually goes to the bed back here, and so it should just flip right on just like that, and we're done with that. So there's only a few more things to plug and we'll be done. So the next wires we're going to be plugging are all of the things up here on the X-axis. And so here they're labeled, so we have X. So the X motor is this one, plug that in. Then we have the X switch, which is the smaller plug, and that is right there next to that gear. So we're going to plug that in. And then we only have two more wires left. The larger one is the E, which is the extruder motor. And then the smaller one is the E, which is the filament detector. And that's all of our wiring. So as you can see, guys, it's not too hard to plug in all the wires. So another thing we need to go ahead and do is we need to install this PTFE tubing, which goes right here in this coupler. So the way it works is you push down on the black part of the coupler, and that releases a spring and makes the tube go in. And then as you release it, it grabs it. And so now we're pretty much officially done with all the installation. But we still do need to adjust a few things. On this hot end here, the eccentric nut is underneath. So we're going to do the same thing we talked about earlier. So first we're going to loosen it, and then we're going to tighten it until there is no wobble and they're very loose. And one way to tell is that if you just grab a wheel and you turn it, you can kind of tell how much tension's on it. So this one has quite light tension, so it's perfect and it's not wobbly. And we're going to do the same thing to these wheels here. So the eccentric nut is right here, and then this one's a little harder, but the eccentric nut's there also. All right, so now that all our rollers are adjusted, the last thing we have left to do is to tighten the belt here that we never did. And the reason is because it's easier to do it now. So I'm just going to grab another wrench, use it to pry a little bit. I'm going to put just a little bit of tension and then tighten one bolt. It's probably a little too tight. Honestly, these things don't need to be that tight. Probably just pulling it with the hand will be tight enough. I think that's good right there. All right, so that feels really good, and the belt has got some tightness to it, but not crazy tight. So we can go ahead and snug this up. So you do want to make sure that your belt is running good on the pulley here, not going off the side. And same thing for the other side where the gear is. So it looks pretty good. All right, guys, so now that we got the whole printer together, I think we can go ahead and plug in our power cord, which by the way is fused, and we have an on and off switch right here. All right, so let's go ahead and hit the power button and see what happens. All right, so our screen is working and looks like it booted up. So the next thing we need to do is auto home it. I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I'm gonna show you guys all the features of the screen here in a little bit. So I'm gonna click the home button, which is on the bottom left corner here. And there it goes. All right, so the Y and the X worked, and now the Z, which is this switch here, if you guys remember. So it should stop right before it gets to the bed. And it's actually perfect. It's exactly what I'm looking for. And you guys can see there how there's just a small gap between the nozzle and the bed. So the way we installed that switch works very well. All right, so let's go ahead and check out this touchscreen. So here, guys, you can see we were in the move head options, and you can move everything individually. You can home things individually, or you can home everything by clicking this home button here. And this is the amount you want it to move, and this button here unlocks all the steppers. So that was move head. Here's where we're going to read our files that are going to come in through the micro SD card. So here we can control the extruder. We can preheat it and then move it, extrude or retract, and the distances, the stop, and that's it. Go back. And this is the preheating button, and this is where we're going to preheat the bed and the nozzle. Same thing here, we got the increments. Here we have the cool down, so if you want to stop preheating. And then the good part here is we have hot buttons for PLA, ABS, and PETG. So let's go ahead and preheat everything to PLA. Click on that, and you guys can see how the hot end changed to 200 and the bed to 60. So we're going to let that preheat. There we have a recovery button. That is, if you lose power, you can continue. Click on more, and we have leveling and settings and about. So let's go to about. This is just about the printer. So it's 220 by 220 by 250. Settings here. You definitely don't want to mess with this unless you know what you're doing. And then we got leveling, which is the next thing we need to do. So as you can see here, we have 5 points. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with one corner and go around. And we're going to go around checking the corners about 3 times in a circle. And once we do that, then we check the center. And you want to do this while the bed is preheated, and that's what it's doing right now. So leveling the bed is not too hard, but it is very crucial if you want your prints to stick and, you know, turn out. So you definitely want to take your time with bed leveling. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the screen our first point, which is going to be right here. And what you're going to need is some kind of sheet of paper. I'm just using regular printing paper. What we're going to do is we're going to loosen the knob underneath until we get the right tension between the bed and the nozzle. So there we go. So we're getting just a little bit of drag. So now we're going to go to the next one, which is over here. All right. Now we're going to go to the other corner. Okay, and then our last corner. And then we're going to go back to where we started. And we're going to need to go around 2 more times just like this. And the reason you want to do that is because every time you change it, everything changes. Like now this is way too tight. So as you go around in the circle, it's going to keep changing. So that's why you need to do it at least 3 times. So I'm going to go ahead and go around a couple more times and then we'll go to the middle. So I ended up going like 5 times. So let's go ahead and go to the middle now. And you definitely want to take your time on this and do it right. So the middle seems pretty good. It's maybe a little bit tighter than I would like it. So if you're in a situation where you need to go down just a little bit, just turn every knob on each corner just a tiny bit, exactly the same, and that should be good. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And now I'm good in the middle. And so our bed leveling is done. So just take your time and do it right, because the flatter you get this thing, the better experience you're going to have, especially when you start printing larger things. All right, so let's go ahead and load in some filament. So I got this red here that we're going to use. So we're just going to put it up here in the spool holder. And then from the spool holder is going to go down into the extrusion mechanism, which there is a filament detector right here. And so there's a hole there that it's going to go through. Then it's going to go between the gear and this idler pulley. And after that, it's going to go through the PTFE tubing into the hot end. We're just going to manually push it through. And as I'm pushing it through, you guys can see it's coming out. So it looks like there was some black in there before, I guess from the manufacturer testing it. All right, so we're almost ready for our first print. So let's grab the little SD card that was included. And on the back of the printer, we can see that's where it inserts. And it plugs in right there, upside down. So to read the SD card, we're going to click on Files, and here we can see that it's reading what's on the SD card. So there's a few G codes here that looks like we can use. So let's go ahead and click on that 30 millimeter. So we're going to click on it and select it, and then after that, what you're going to do is you're going to click Open. And it's going to ask, are you sure you want to start printing? I'm going to say yes. And there it goes, it's your start. So let's hope we got our bed leveling right. And it looks to be good. Well, that's a good sign. So it appears that it's making a raft. Kind of hard to see, guys, but yeah, so it looks like our bed leveling was just right. And that's what you want to do. You want to take your time. That way, when you do go to print, you know, you're not digging into your bed or being too far away and then, you know, not sticking correctly. So yeah, it looks like everything is going good. All right, so as we're printing, let's take a closer look here at the menu system. So here on the very top, we can see the file that we're printing. It's called 30mm 01 G code. Here we have the extruder information, which is the temperature it's at and what it's set at. The bed information, which is 60, and that's where it's at. There we have the fan, which right now is not on, the part cooling fan. Below that, we have the Z location, which is 1.1 millimeters from where it started. Below that, we have a bar of percentage of how much has been completed. Then we have the estimated amount of time, how much it will take to print this, and the amount of time that passed by. And over here we have a little bit of information of the process, which is printing. So on the side we have a pause, some options, and a stop. So if we click on the options, we can see we can adjust the hot end, the bed, the fan, the overall speed of the printer, so we can speed it up if we wanted to. There's little dots for more, and the flow rate. So it does have quite a few options and really good ones. So this is the flow rate of the filament. All right, and that's everything. All right, so the printer is boogieing away and it's making that 30 millimeter box or whatever that thing is. And it shouldn't take too long to finish. So everything seems to be working just fine and there's no issues. And you guys can hear it, it's not super loud, but I'm gonna bring the mic to it. But it definitely has the stepper motor sound. So our extruder is pushing filament in, and everything seems good. All right, so I'm just gonna let it print and we'll see what it puts out. So our little square is done and it did not take long. It looks pretty good. So as you can see, it pops off quite easy. So this seems like a pretty good build surface. Well, let's take a closer look at this thing. So it does have a raft. Let's see if we can, okay, so it pops off quite easy. That's good. And I don't know if I'll be able to show you. There you go, yeah. So the walls are looking pretty good. So it looks quite promising. And this is just a little test square. So we need to print some more stuff. Let's see what else we can print that's on the SD card in this red. All right, let's go to files. So it looks like they do have a 3D benchy in here. So let's go ahead and print that. That's actually a good idea. Click open. Yes. And there we go. It started. So it just needs to warm up. So it's saying that it's going to take 2 hours and 26 minutes. That's not too bad. All right, so there it goes. All right, and our level still looks good, and it is building a raft, looks like. So these prints that are included on the SD card come with rafts, which is okay. And I prefer printing straight to the bed, but this is a more safe way to print if you want it to be a more guaranteed. All right, so it looks like the print started good and everything is fine. So once it's done, we're going to take a closer look at it. Alrighty, so the benchy is done. So the bed is actually still warm. I'm going to use a spatula here to break it loose, and that came off really easy actually. All right, so looks like the benchy is looking really, really good. You guys can see the reflection. Now there is some vibrations you can kind of see, especially right here, and those are actually from the stepper motors. So there is a way to minimize this, is to install some TL smoothers on the printer, and that'll eliminate a lot of this vibration. Let's see if this raft comes off. Okay, so it's not coming off easy, but it is coming off, sort of. Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I don't like to use raft, because if it's not done right, you're gonna have really rough bottoms. But overall it's looking really promising, and even the cooling is quite decent also. Now we do have a little blob back here, but if we look at the arches, they're pretty good. So overall a very respectable print. So I'm gonna print some more things on this printer and we'll take a look at the print quality. All right, and here are all the prints that we have printed. And overall, this printer did very well. And the great part about it is it just works. So let's go ahead and look at these models. We already saw the benchy and the little square that we printed earlier. And those two were included with the printer. And the third print that we printed was also on the SD card with the printer, are these little birds here. And they actually turned out really well. So overall, if you look at the reflections, you can see that the layers are quite uniform and it looks good overall. So the bottom did have a raft. So even though this is a pretty good print, it seems like most of the time the prints that come with the printer just don't print as good as my own slicing. So this pig here I sliced myself, so it's supposed to be kind of like a piggy bank. This is just a scaled down version of him, and his nose here is where you put the coins in. And then on the bottom here, they're supposed to be a plug. So the reason you see stringing here is because there's a little overhang here that had no supports. But in any case, if we look at this pig, this thing turned out really well. Now if you see some kind of lines, that's just filament discoloring. Pretty much all the layers are sitting really nice, and you can tell by the reflection. And what's interesting, there's a lot of retraction here between the ears, and as you can see, we have no trouble there at all. Now that being said, that there is a little bit of vibration in the print, and that's quite normal, and that's just stepper motor vibrations going into the print. And one way to fix that is to install TL smoothers, and that usually drastically improves the print quality. And a lot of the lower budget machines, even the Ender 3, are prone to this. So if you were going to do any mod, I think TL smoothers would be my first choice. Alright, so for the next part, let's look at something that's on the precision side. So this is a bearing, and it's supposed to move. So when I print these, normally I can break them loose and make them work, but there has been times where they've been fused together. This one printed and broke loose actually quite easy, so you guys can see it works. So that just tells me that the precision on this printer and the way it puts the filament down, there is some pretty good accuracy. So I got an Allen wrench here that can go in here so you guys can see a little better how this spins. And there we go. So this is a good print to test for tolerances, and that's definitely nice, especially if you're going to print parts that have moving pieces in them. So we got a couple prints here. So this is just a calibration cube, and it turned out quite well. You can see by the reflection, hopefully. the layers are sitting quite even, and as you can see, it's got a really good wall. And the top also looks pretty good. And here you guys can see the finish on the bottom. And by the way, speaking about the bottom, I have had no issues with this bed and this Build-Tech surface. When it heats up, it sticks very well, and then when it cools, it pops right off. So whatever they're using here is working very well. So the next piece here is actually something I needed, and this is a clip for automotive purposes. So if you guys ever worked on cars, you know that these clips are pretty easy to break and they get lost. So I wanted to see if I can print some and use some. So I printed a few, and I already installed some of them, and I have one here to show you. And they're definitely not even close to factory specs. They will break quite easy if you put too much tension on them, but for light applications, and that's all I really needed it for, it worked out really well. And prints like this kind of remind me of why we even have 3D printers, is so we can actually print things that are useful for our everyday lives. And plus there's kind of a satisfaction of printing something that you need. So all right, and for the last print, I printed this vase here. So this was printed in spiralized mode, so it's just one layer. And on this kind of print, we can really see the kind of adhesion we have in one layer. And you can see, guys, how uniform it is. Now you can probably tell there is some vibrations go to the print, but they're very minor, I would have to say. And actually most of the print looks really good, but over here you can kind of see where it shows up a bit. But overall it's super solid, and the bottom turned out pretty good. There was a little bit of bubbling here, there was no issue, just covered it back up. And overall a solid print, and you guys can see if I push on it, it's quite strong. I mean, obviously if I push too hard it'll crack, but and here on the top we can also see that it's quite flexible. Obviously this will depend on the filament a lot, but also on how well the layers stuck together. So yeah, overall very happy with how this printer prints. And the most thing to take away from it is that the whole experience is quite simple and intuitive, and there's nothing too much to worry about. So I really appreciate this kind of printers because they're simple, but they just work. And this one definitely does it. And I feel like that's quite important for some people, because if you're not very mechanically inclined, you want something that doesn't need to be fiddled with all the time. So my experience with this printer was great, and I would totally recommend this thing if you are even getting started. There is some assembly required that's a little bit challenging, but overall it's quite logical and not too hard to do. And plus we have all these great features on this printer, like filament detection, so if you run out of filament it'll pause. We have the power out recovery, the power goes out, you can continue printing. We got a really nice touchscreen with a good UI, a very flat bed because of the glass. It makes it very even, so no matter what part of the bed you're on, it's always level, and that makes a big deal when you're printing something huge. Your bed is not going to fluctuate because of warping or whatnot else. And the printing area is 220 by 220 by 250. So overall a very solid design and a great value. So yeah guys, overall you can see I like this printer, so thumbs up for it. And if you're interested in this printer, I'm gonna have some links in the description, so check that out. And also guys, if you enjoyed this video, then hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos like this and you're not subscribed, I do a lot of 3D printing stuff, so hit that subscribe button to see more. Alright, well hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.